The police constable who arrived at the house on Green Street in Enfield, London, would later report seeing a chair levitate, wobble, and slide across the floor, but she couldn't figure out why. It was just the beginning. That boring old piece of furniture was the first crack in a family's reality, the first sign that the wall between our world and something else was starting to crumble. We tell ourselves it's just the house settling. Old pipes, the wind, a trick of the light. But what if it's not? What if that dark, quiet space at the back of your bedroom isn't just for storing junk? What if it's a doorway? There's a special kind of primal fear that comes with closets, isn't there? They what you call liminal spaces, thresholds between the world you know and the one you don't, the seen and the unseen. In folklore and ghost stories, they're always hiding places for monsters, gateways for spirits, and prisons for dark secrets. But this isn't just about stories. When you start digging through the archives of paranormal investigations, and even more chilling, the real-life case files of unsolved mysteries, you start to see a disturbing pattern. The little things we brush off as our imagination or just a coincidence. They pop up over and over again, tied to these small, dark spaces. Today, we're not talking about the boogeyman. We're going to look at 5 terrifying signs, each one connected to a documented, real-life case that might suggest your closet is more than just a closet. We re-diving into a world where the line between what's real and what's not gets blurry, where everyday objects become tools of terror, and where a simple wooden door might be holding back something that really wants to get out. We'll look at the evidence, the eyewitness accounts, and the questions that have stumped investigators for decades. These are the signs that you might not be alone in your own home. The first sign is one of the most classic and deeply unsettling things people report in hauntings: personal items getting moved around. It always starts small. You can't find your keys. A book you were just reading is now on the other side of the room. It's easy to write this stuff off. We're all forgetful, right? But what happens when it stops feeling random and starts feeling malicious? When your things aren't just moved, but moved with a creepy, symbolic purpose. This isn't about a poltergeist just tossing things around for fun. This is about some unseen intelligence trying to make a point, turning your personal space into a psychological war zone. The object that's moved is usually something personal, and where it ends up is almost always meant to make you feel something specific: fear, confusion, or just pure dread. Maybe the best case to illustrate this is the haunting tied to the Black Hope curse. Back in 1982, a young couple, Sam and Judith Haney, moved into a new house in Newport, Texas. They thought their dream home was built on empty land. They decided to put a swimming pool in the backyard, but when the contractors started digging, they found human remains. A local old-timer confirmed their worst fears. The whole neighborhood was built right on top of the old Black Hope Cemetery, a burial ground for African Americans that was used from after the Civil War until the 1930s. The Haneys were horrified to learn they had dug up a grave. They found out the 2 people buried in their yard were a couple named Charlie and Betty Thomas. With no living relatives to be found, the Haneys paid to have the remains reinterred in a proper cemetery, thinking that would be the end of it. They were wrong. The strange activity started almost right away, but it was the movement of one particular item that became the most infamous part of the case. One morning, Judith Haney went to her closet to get her favorite pair of red shoes. They were gone. She and Sam searched the whole house, every closet, every drawer. Nothing. It was completely baffling. Later that day, Sam was outside near the original gravesite when he saw them. There, placed neatly side by side on the disturbed earth of Betty Thomas's former grave, were Judith's red shoes. They looked like someone had carefully carried them over and set them down as a gift. The detail that made this truly terrifying? Sam realized it was Betty Thomas's birthday. This wasn't random. It was a calculated, symbolic act. The entity, which Sam believed was Charlie Thomas's spirit, had apparently taken something from Judith's private space, her closet, and placed it as a gift on his wife's grave. It showed intelligence, intent, and a total disregard for the Haney's lives. It was a message. This kind of thing shows up in other chilling cases, too. In The Haunting of the Wythe House in Williamsburg, Virginia, the ghost of Lady in Skipwith is said to haunt her old bedroom. The story goes that she lost one of her red shoes running home in distress one night. Visitors to the historic house have reported that if you kneel in front of her closet and say, "Lady Skipwith, I found your red shoe," you'll hear a frantic rushing sound, as if her spirit is desperately trying to get it. Her ghost is even said to appear coming out of the closet, forever tied to that lost shoe. In the unsolved case of Christy Jo Nichols, who vanished from her home in Nebraska, the placement of her belongings was a key and very strange part of the investigation. Her suitcase and some personal items were found neatly arranged by a roadside rest stop. The investigating officer said it looked like the items were put there to be found, not just thrown away. Her husband was able to list, with chilling precision, every single item of clothing supposedly taken from her closet. The whole thing felt staged, a deliberate message, but what it meant is still a mystery. When objects disappear from the safety of your closet and show up again in symbolic or ritualistic ways, it's beyond any simple explanation. It suggests you're not dealing with some random force, but with an intelligence that's watching you, learning about you, and using your own things to communicate in the most unsettling way possible. The second sign is a feeling that has been reported in ghost stories for centuries, a sudden, weird drop in temperature. You walk into a room, and it doesn't matter what the thermostat says, you pass through a pocket of intense, bone-chilling cold. It's often in a very specific spot, sometimes just a few feet wide, and it disappears as fast as it showed up. Paranormal investigators and witnesses often say these cold spots are concentrated in certain areas of a house, and one of the most common places is near a closet. The main theory in paranormal research is that spirits need energy to manifest, whether it's to move something, make a sound, or appear as a ghost. To get that energy, they pull it from the air around them. This is what's believed to cause the rapid drop in temperature, creating those cold spots people feel. It's a physical sign of a supernatural event, a real clue that something you can't see is present and active. This was a big part of what the Williams family experienced. They were neighbors of the Haneys in that haunted Newport subdivision, and their home was also built over the forgotten Black Hope Cemetery. Ben and Jean Williams, and their granddaughter Carly, started experiencing weird things almost as soon as they moved in. Carly described hitting these cold spots all the time, even in the middle of a brutal Texas summer. She'd be walking through the house and suddenly step into an ice-cold area. A feeling, she said, always came with an overwhelming sense of dread and the distinct feeling of being watched. These chilling encounters were a constant reminder that their home wasn't completely theirs. You find similar stories in lots of other famous hauntings. At the infamous Sally House in Atchison, Kansas, which many paranormal experts call one of the most haunted places in the U.S., visitors and investigators constantly report sudden, dramatic temperature drops. The house is supposedly haunted by the ghost of a little girl named Sally who died during a botched appendectomy, but also by something much meaner. These cold spots are often recorded in the nursery and bedrooms, where the paranormal activity is most intense, and are seen as a warning that something worse is about to happen. The same was true for the notorious Borley Rectory in England, once called the most haunted house in England. For years, residents and investigators, including the famous paranormal researcher Harry Price, documented all kinds of phenomena. Along with ghosts and moving objects were consistent reports of unexplainable cold. These cold spots were so common, they were considered a trademark of the haunting, a sign that the veil between worlds was thin. Skeptics, of course, have rational explanations. They point to drafts from leaky windows or doors, problems with the vents, or just natural temperature changes in a house. And a lot of the time, they're probably right. A draft is just a draft. But what makes the cold spots in these paranormal cases so weird is their nature. They in a very specific spot. They appear and disappear suddenly for no good reason, and they're often paired with other strange things happening. Investigators use thermal cameras to record these temperature drops, sometimes capturing a change of 20 or 30 degrees in a few seconds, in a room with no draft in sight. When you feel a cold spot near your closet, it could be nothing. But if it keeps happening, if it comes with that gut feeling of being watched, or if it happens right before other weird stuff, it might be the second terrifying sign. It could be the physical proof of an unseen presence gathering the energy it needs to make itself known, turning the air around you cold as it gets ready to step out of the dark. The third sign takes us from the sensory to the technological. We live surrounded by a sea of electronics. We don't even notice them until they start acting up. This is another classic sign of a powerful haunting. Electronics going haywire for no reason, especially when they do things that seem to break the laws of physics. The theory in the paranormal world is that ghosts, since they're made of energy, can mess directly with the electromagnetic fields that power our devices. This interference can show up in a bunch of ways: lights flickering or turning on and off by themselves, batteries draining in an instant, or devices turning on even when they're unplugged. When this stuff is centered around one specific area, like a closet, it points to a hot spot of paranormal energy. The Black Hope Curse case has a startling example of this. One night, Judith Haney was woken up by a strange sight in her bedroom. A clock, which was unplugged and sitting on her dresser, started sparking and glowing with an eerie blue light. It went completely haywire, acting in a way that was totally disconnected from any power source. This wasn't just a simple malfunction. It was a bizarre, impossible display that seemed designed to be terrifying. This thing with devices working without power is a recurring theme in poltergeist cases. The Williams family, who were also caught up in the Black Hope curse, said their kids' toys would mysteriously come to life long after their batteries were dead. Can you imagine the horror of hearing a toy, dead and forgotten in a closet, suddenly start talking or making noise in the middle of the night? Maybe one of the most well-documented cases involving electronic chaos is the Enfield poltergeist. Starting in 1977, the Hodgson family in London went through a terrifying ordeal that was centered on the two young daughters, Janet and Margaret. While the case is famous for levitation and moving furniture, it was also full of electronic problems. Paranormal investigators Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair, who studied the case for months, recorded countless instances of their equipment failing. Brand new batteries in their cameras and tape recorders would die in minutes. Lights would flicker and burn out. Their sensitive recording gear would pick up weird interference and disembodied voices. The activity seemed to follow 11-year-old Janet, suggesting she was the focal point, but the disruptions themselves were a classic sign of a powerful, energy-sucking presence. In the 1980s, the case of Tina Resch in Columbus, Ohio, brought this phenomenon into the spotlight. 14-year-old Tina was at the center of a storm of poltergeist activity. In her family's home, lights would turn on and off on their own, and the garbage disposal and clothes dryer would start up randomly. Most disturbingly, a heart monitor for one of the other children in the house began to sound its alarm for no reason and kept blaring even after it was unplugged from the wall. An electrician came to check things out, but couldn't find anything wrong with the wiring. The power was behaving in impossible ways. Skeptics argue this stuff can be explained by power surges, bad wiring, or even pranks. In the Enfield case, the girls did admit to faking some of the events, which has made a lot of people doubt the whole story. But many of the electronic disturbances were seen by multiple people, including cops and journalists, who were convinced they were real. The sheer consistency of these stories across different, unrelated cases is hard to just ignore. From a glowing, unplugged clock in Texas to a screaming, powerless heart monitor in Ohio, the stories sound eerily similar. When the electronics near your closet start acting up, it's easy to blame a logical fault. But when batteries die way too fast, when devices work without power, or when the activity seems smart and responsive, you might be seeing the third sign. It suggests an entity isn't just there, but is actively feeding on the electrical energy in your home, using your own technology to announce its presence and, a lot of the time, to scare you. We've looked at cases that have stumped investigators for decades, but these stories aren't just in the history books. Lots of people have their own unexplained moments, those quiet, creepy things they can't quite figure out. Have you ever had something go missing only to show up in a weird place? Or felt a sudden, icy chill in a warm room? If you've got a story, share it in the comments below. You might be surprised how many other people have gone through the exact same thing. The fourth sign is maybe the most direct and personal kind of paranormal contact, hearing things. It's one thing to see an object move or feel a cold spot, but it's a whole other level of terrifying to hear something that isn't there. This can be a whole range of sounds. The clear sound of footsteps in an empty hall, a faint whisper that seems to come from right next to you, or even hearing your name called by a voice you don't recognize. These sounds are often reported coming from dark, empty spaces, and closets are a common source. Hearing disembodied sounds suggests a ghost is trying to communicate or, at least, make its presence known in a way you can't ignore. Unlike the normal creaks and groans of an old house, these sounds are often clear, distinct, and sound like human actions. They're a direct invasion of your personal space, a violation of the quiet of your own home. The Black Hope Curse case is, again, a perfect example. Sam and Judith Haney reported hearing eerie, disembodied voices talking while they were trying to sleep. One time, when Judith was home alone, she heard a clear, unfamiliar voice ask, "What are you doing?" Terrified, she searched the house, but every door was locked and no one was there. The Williams family, their neighbors, also had auditory hauntings. They said toilets would flush by themselves, and as the water drained, they could hear the sound of voices mixed in with the noise, as if the spirits were using the sound to help their own voices manifest. This kind of thing was also a huge part of the haunting at Borley Rectory. From the very first residents, the Bull family, in the 1860s, there were reports of unexplained footsteps. The Bull children said they heard them every night, slowly coming towards their bedroom door before stopping, followed by 3 clear raps. They'd throw the door open to find a cold, empty hall. Later residents, the Foister family, also documented tons of sounds, including constant footsteps and banging, which were so bad they put together a huge report for investigator Harry Price. Whispers and shadowy figures were also reported all through the rectory's history, often linked to closets and dark hallways. The Enfield poltergeist case gives us one of the most famous and debated examples of disembodied voices. A big part of the haunting involved a gruff, raspy voice that claimed to be the spirit of Bill Wilkins, a man who had died in the house before. This voice would speak through 11-year-old Janet Hodgson, sometimes for hours. Recordings of this voice exist, and it's chilling to hear it coming from a little girl. While skeptics argue Janet was doing ventriloquism, the investigators on the scene were convinced the voice was something separate from her, noting it kept going even when her mouth was full of water. The case also had countless knocking and rapping sounds on the walls, sounds that seemed to answer questions and follow the family from room to room. Modern paranormal investigators use sensitive audio gear to capture what they call electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. These are voices and sounds that you can't hear with your own ears at the time, but show up when you play the recording back. Investigators have caught tons of EVPs in haunted places, many of which seem to be direct answers to questions they ask out loud. These recordings often pick up whispers, cries, and single words coming from empty rooms and, you guessed it, from inside closets. You can't overstate the psychological impact of hearing these sounds. It messes with our basic sense of security. The silence of our own homes is something we take for granted until it's broken by something that shouldn't be there. It implies someone is watching, a hidden presence sharing your space. When you hear footsteps coming toward your bedroom door and you know you're alone, or when a voice whispers from the direction of your closet, you're experiencing the fourth sign. It's a sign that whatever is haunting your space isn't content to just watch anymore. It's actively trying to be heard. The last sign is the most subjective, but for anyone who's felt it, it's the most powerful and convincing of all, an overwhelming and unexplainable feeling of dread, terror, or being oppressed. This isn't just feeling a little creeped out. This is a deep, gut-level emotional reaction that hits you for no reason. People who've experienced it describe it as a suffocating wave of fear, a primal sense of wrongness, or a sudden, paralyzing feeling that they're in serious danger. And this feeling is often tied to a specific spot, a room, a corner, or, very often, a closet. This phenomenon suggests some kind of psychological or psychic attack. While the other signs are physical, this one goes straight for your mind and emotions. It's as if the ghost, or the leftover energy from a tragedy, is projecting its own despair, anger, or evil onto anyone who gets too close. This heavy, oppressive atmosphere is a common thing in places with a history of extreme violence or suffering. Think about the infamous house in Amityville, New York. In 1975, the Lutz family bolted from their new home after just 28 days, saying they were terrorized by paranormal forces. Their story, which started after the horrific murders of the DeFeo family in the house a year earlier, included all sorts of phenomena. But one of the most constant things George Lutz talked about was the overwhelming negative vibe, especially in certain parts of the house. He said he constantly felt angry, agitated, and scared, emotions that were totally out of character for him. This sense of dread was a constant weight on the family, a psychological assault that finally drove them out. A similar oppressive feeling is a key part of the haunting of the Sallie house. While the house is known for physical attacks and moving objects, almost every visitor and investigator who spends time there reports feeling an intense and uncomfortable atmosphere. This includes sudden waves of overwhelming emotion, deep sadness, or a terrifying feeling of being threatened, especially in the basement, which is believed to be home to a malicious, non-human entity. This feeling is often the first clue for visitors that the stories are real. In many documented hauntings, this sense of dread is tied to a specific trigger point. For example, at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, an old prison known for its brutal system of solitary confinement, visitors often report being hit with feelings of despair and terror in the old cell blocks. The sheer weight of a century of human misery seems to have permanently stained the place. Similarly, at Poveglia Island in Italy, a former quarantine station and asylum, visitors almost immediately feel an oppressive sense of evil, with many running away in terror shortly after they get there. The land itself seems to radiate a history of suffering. Skeptics might say these feelings are just psychological suggestion. If you go into a place expecting to be scared, you're going to be. They might also point to infrasound, which are low-frequency sound waves that are below the level of human hearing but can cause feelings of anxiety, dread, and the sense of being watched. But that doesn't fully explain why these feelings are so often pinpointed to a very specific spot, like a single closet in an otherwise normal room. It doesn't explain why the feeling goes away the second the person steps away from that spot. When an intense, irrational wave of fear grabs you every time you go near your closet, when opening the door feels like staring into a black hole, and when you feel a real sense of menace coming from that dark space, you might be experiencing the fifth and most insidious sign. It's a sign that the haunting is no longer just messing with your environment. It's messing with you. It's a direct attack on your mind, an invisible warning that you're on dangerous ground, and that whatever is in the darkness does not want you there. We've walked through 5 different, but connected, signs of a haunting. We've seen how an unseen intelligence can use your own things to send a terrifying message, like with Judith Haney's red shoes. We've looked at how a supernatural presence can suck the energy out of a room, leaving behind pockets of unexplainable cold. We've examined the physics-defying chaos of unplugged electronics coming to life, from glowing clocks to talking toys. We've listened to the disembodied voices and footsteps that echo through houses like Borley Rectory and Enfield, a direct auditory attack from another world. And finally, we've faced the crippling sense of dread that can radiate from a single spot, a psychological assault on the very people who live there. These aren't just things from scary movies. They are repeating patterns pulled from the documented reports of real families and the investigations of experienced researchers. So why closets? Why do these small, dark spaces so often become the center of such terrifying activity? Like we said at the beginning, closets are liminal spaces. They are thresholds. In folklore and paranormal theory, these in-between places are seen as weak spots in the fabric of reality, places where the veil between our world and the next is at its thinnest. They are private, hidden, and dark, qualities often associated with spirits that don't want to be seen or that have negative intentions. A closet can be a perfect anchor point, a quiet, undisturbed space from which a ghost can watch and interact with our world. Of course, for every weird thing that happens, there might be a perfectly logical explanation. A misplaced object, a draft, faulty wiring, a house settling, an overactive imagination. But when these signs start showing up together, when the pattern becomes too clear to deny, it gets much harder to brush it off. When your closet is no longer just a place for clothes, but a source of constant fear and unexplainable events, you're left with a chilling question. Is that just an old closet, or is it a doorway to something much, much darker? The answer might be something you don't want to find.